So when old Dad comes in with a black eye, she just like, I thought he was the devil. So that'll work out for her. This morning, if you got your Bibles, you can be turning over to Romans chapter 12. We're going to be in the first verse, but I'm going to ask you a question this morning. Do you understand your shape? You say, well, Micah, looking at you, you've got a pretty good shape. It's kind of oval. Dad's is a little more round. My son Sam, he's a little more rectangular. And everybody's got different shapes. Apparently women have pear shapes and hourglass shapes and their figures, and everybody gets different shapes. That's not hardly the type of shape that I'm talking about. This morning I went through the whole service last time. It wasn't Micah on. So, but this morning I'm not talking about what kind of shape you're in versus a geometrical shape, but I'm talking about what shape is your life in. You see, though, that, I'm kind of a science buff to some extreme. I'm not in the sci-fi stuff, but I was reading the other day, and it said that scientists have discovered that while doing experiments on the spaceship Columbia, that they have discovered that there's 26 lakes under the Saharan Desert. You might know that? So you can take that with you as you leave today. Hopefully with a renewed soul and mind, strength, and salvation. If you didn't come with that, you can also leave with knowing that there's 26 lakes under the Saharan Desert. Well, they didn't seem to that. But it's crazy to think that the people have suffered and died because of a lack of resource that they were standing on top of, but they just couldn't dig in deep enough to get hold of it. I want you to think about that this morning. A resource that you have at your disposal that can help you to survive, but you've got to be willing to dig in deep to get hold of it. What kind of shape are you in? Some of us right here are sitting here today settling for far less than what God has intended for our lives. Everybody agree with that? We've settled for far less than what God has intended for our lives, and we're missing out on the joys and blessings that He has for us, intended to share with us, because we're not willing to dig in deep and tap into His resources. Does everybody understand that this morning? We're not willing to put forth the effort. I've said many times, Dad always told me when I was younger that if it's not worth working for, it's not worth having. Did anybody ever tell you that it's going to be easy? I've said this all the time. Did anybody ever tell you that the Christian life is going to be easy? If it's going to be easy, He wouldn't have left a comforter for us to go with us, would He? If it was going to be easy, He wouldn't have, when He left, He wouldn't have left that comforter for us to help us, to assist us along the walk. But this morning, we're going to break down the first 3 verses of Romans chapter 12. We're going to break down each verse individually. Verse 1, it says, I beseech you therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present your bodies a living sacrifice, holy, acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. Now, if we break that down, it's saying, so here's what I want you to do. Here's what I want you to do. With God helping you, take your everyday, ordinary life, you're sleeping, you're eating, you're going to work, you're walking around life, and place it before God and as an offering. That's what it's saying, right? It's saying to present your whole body, your whole life, everything that happens in your life, a living sacrifice, an offering to Christ. Is that what it's saying? Does everybody agree with that? Raise your hand. Everybody still awake? Anybody that's not gets an elbow. I didn't see any elbows thrown, so we're still good. Give your whole life to Him and embracing that what God has done in your life, is doing in your life, and will do, realizing that that's the best thing for you. I didn't see my shaking her head. You're not right, so we'll keep going. This reminds me of a story that was of a boy that was selling newspapers on a cold day. Now, that's hard to imagine in the middle of July. In order to warm up, the church that he was selling newspapers by had a service at night, and he would come in and sit on the very back row just to warm up. But one service, he was sitting back there, and he got to listening to what the preacher was saying, and just fully enthralled in what he was saying and concentrating on what he had to say. And the little boy was was just fully intent on understanding, connecting with what was being said. And as the preacher spoke, he hung on every word. And at the end of the service, he took up an offering, the preacher did. And the little boy watched as the offering plate passed from pew to pew till it got back to where he was. The little boy looked at the offering plate when it come to him and grabbed a hold of it and looked at the offering plate and thought for a minute and set it down and took off his shoes and stepped in the offering plate. The man looked at him and said, "Boy, what are you doing?" He said, "Sir, this has been a slow day." He said, "I don't have any money to give. The only offering I have to give is myself." Folks, that's what verse 1 is saying. God's not expecting for you to throw thousands of dollars His way. God's not expecting for you to give something that you don't have. All God wants is what He gave you. Life. He wants your life working for Him. Let's read on down into verse 2. It says, "And be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God." Let's break that down. It says, this is Micah breaking it down. It says, be recognizable from the rest of the world. Be distinguishable from the rest of the world. Keep your mind set on godly things, and don't let it be perverted by the things of this world. You have to be in the world to be alive, but you don't have to be of the world. You have to participate in the daily walks of this world. That don't mean you have to be of the things that are going on. People say, "Well, if Jesus is here, get me in the bars." That's true, it may be. But it wouldn't be ordering around everybody. He may be in those places, professing God's name, proclaiming God's name, doing His part, but He wouldn't be participating. See, that's the difference about being conformed to this world and being transformed. When there's a transformation going on, you change from what you were before, right? When I was a kid, of course, they're kind of coming back now. There was Transformers. That's been a few years ago. How trends keep coming back about every 20 years. But once it transformed, you couldn't tell what it was before, could you? Once you transformed that transformer into the other being, you couldn't tell what it was before. Another story. So there was a very ugly man. Dad, I promise this is not about you. There's a very ugly man. So ugly that he scared people. But his long desire was to marry the mayor's daughter that was very beautiful. This man was very lonely. Thought of very many ways in order to obtain his goal in life was to marry that mayor's daughter. So he had him a mask made, a very handsome mask. And time went on and he met that mayor's daughter and married that mayor's daughter. But after time, she began to tell that was a mask that he was wearing. And she looked at him and said, "Take the mask off." And he said, "Only because I love you." He said, "But be careful of what you will see underneath." So he took his mask off and she just smiled and said, "Exactly what I thought." See, she was expecting to see what she saw on the inside. So what she saw on the outside. That man was expecting a gasp, a shocking gasp, and her to run screaming out of the room, I guess, because of seeing that ugly face. But what had happened, that man had wore that mask for so long that his original face had conformed to the handsome attributes of the mask. I said that to say this: you put on the mask of Jesus, you're going to conform to that mask. You're going to be transformed into the face of Jesus, desiring the same things that He desires, wanting the same thing that He wants, doing the same thing that He does. See, if you think about going into a movie theater, if you go into the movies, as soon as you walk into the movies in the middle of the day, it's hard to see, isn't it? It's hard to see. It's black in there. It's dark. It's hard to see. But after you get in there for just a little bit of time, what happens? Your eyes kind of get adjusted to being in the dark, don't they? And it becomes a little bit easier to see. And the things of the darkness don't seem as dark anymore. That's exactly what I'm talking about in this verse.
If you get used to being in the dark, things in the dark don't seem that dark anymore. Things that are in the darkness don't seem to be so dark. The sinful nature of that dark side doesn't seem to be so sinful anymore. I think sometimes because we want to participate in it, we kind of justify that, don't we? Verse 3, let's go on down. For I say, "'Tis the grace given unto me to every man that is among you, not to think of himself more highly than he ought to think, but to think soberly, according as God hath dealt to every man the measure of faith." Verse 3 is saying, I'm no better than you. I'm only here by the grace of God, same as you. Same as you. We've been bought with a price, haven't we? Paid for it. Paid for it. We're not bigger than God. Sometimes I think we get to working on our own problems, and I think I said this Wednesday night, we get to thinking about that God didn't create these problems that we're in life, so we're not going to try to use Him to help us get out of them. Do we say that to ourselves sometimes? God didn't make this mess, I made it, I'm going to fix it myself. And folks, we're bypassing the very one that can fix our problems. We're not bigger than He is. We're not better than He is. We're not more than He is. The last story said a man was driving down the expressway in rush hour traffic when he received a call from his wife on the cell phone. Says, "Honey, you need to be careful." Said, "Some idiot, I just heard on the news that some idiot's driving in the wrong direction, the same road that you're on." You ever heard of this? To which the husband responded, "It's not just one, there are hundreds of them." Sometimes that's us, isn't it? Sometimes that's us. It can be there exactly black and white. It can be exactly what we need. But you can say, "Oh, that's not for us. That's not for me. That's wrong. That's not for me. It's everybody else's fault, not mine." It goes on down in the verses there to say that God has called us all to do a job. I'm not going to read all those. You can read those. Verses 4 through 6 there, it talks about how God has called us all to do a job. Whatever that job is, I was talking to Jason over the weekend. He said, and I've said this several times before, everybody's not a preacher. Everybody's not a teacher. Everybody's not a song leader. But there's jobs in every church to do. It's time to transform ourselves into being in the world, to be conformed to God's way. Not the world's way. Conform to God's way. Put on the Jesus mask and work for Him. And whatever that job is that God's calling us to do, could be the very key in causing someone to accept Jesus. It could be the very key, the very intricate part of somebody fixing things up with the Lord. You see, God's called everybody to do a job. I think sometimes we get to thinking, "Well, I can't preach, so I'll just sit here. Well, I can't teach, so I'll just sit here. Well, I can't sing, so I'll just sit here." But I don't think there's a very one of us that can't pray. I don't think there's a very one of us that's not capable of praising Jesus. I don't think there's a one of us sitting here today that's not capable of giving an encouraging word to somebody. I don't think there's anybody that's sitting here today that's not capable of putting your arm around somebody and saying, "You know what? God loves you, and I do too. I'm here for you." See, folks, that's being transformed. That's putting on the mask of Jesus. It's not belittling ourselves, or it's not God asking us to do something that we're not capable of doing. It's God wanting us to be transformed into His path, into His shape for our lives. You see, whether you're a round shape or you're straight shape with no fat on it whatsoever, God can use that. God can use you just as you are. God can use the shape that you're in to put you in a better. All you've got to do is turn things over to Him. All you've got to do is give your life to Him and say, "God, I'm willing to go. I'm willing to be. I'm willing to do whatever You want me to do. Whatever You want me to do. I realize that my way has got me into trouble. I I realize that my decisions are definitely not perfect. I'm realizing, God, that I'm nothing without you. And the shape that I've got myself in is pitiful. Say, Micah, I think I'm doing pretty good. Well, just think, folks, if you're doing pretty good now, just think of how much better you could do with it. If you're doing pretty good without Him now, just imagine the things that you could do with Him. Just imagine the things that He could do through you. It seems as though when we need God the most in our lives, we tend to push Him away from us, don't we? When we need Him the most, we tend to push Him away. When we need Him in control of our lives, is when we're afraid to let Him have the most control. You see, folks, this morning, contrary to what you might think, He knows more than you do. He wants what's best for you. You just got to give it to Him. This morning, what kind of shape are you in? What kind of shape are you in? Are you in a shape of not knowing which way to turn? Are you in a shape of knowing that the world has twisted you around in so many ways that you don't know whether you're drowning or hanging out? Because the devil can get you in that shape. The devil can get you in a terrible shape. And it's when we try to hang on and try to predict our lives and try to control our lives, is when we move ourselves farther out of His will. We move ourselves farther out of the way that He wants us in our lives. This morning, are you willing to put your selfish desires aside and crawl into the offering plate? Are you willing to put on the mask of Jesus and let your life be conformed to His? Or are you willing to turn around and say, I'm wrong? I've been driving on the wrong side of the road the whole time. I've been thinking my whole time that I'm in charge of my life. That I'm in control of my destiny. That I'm the big man serving in this relationship. Folks, until you come to that point that you realize that the shape you're in is all because you got yourself in that shape. The shape that you're in is because you've not let Him take over your life. This morning, are you willing to say, Father, you're the potter and I'm the clay. Mold me into the shape that you want me to be in. As we stand. Spiritually, I try to stay in shape. I let God shape my life. But this morning, Micah preached about present our bodies a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable unto God, which is our reasonable service. I don't know about you, but I like Jesus. Take this whole world and give me Jesus. I like Jesus. He come into this world. Birds had nests, foxes had holes, but the Son of Man had nowhere to lay his head. And they said, we're going to crucify him. And somebody said, what for? Said he must die for the sins of the world, that people might be saved. And they said, well, how come? Because it was in God's plan that we've all sinned and come short of the glory of God, every one of us. We've all sinned. But He made it possible Because there had to be a sacrifice made. Can't you imagine? Jesus says, I'll be that sacrifice. And all you have to do is believe and accept and come. All ye that labor and are heavy laden. This morning, Micah tells us that Jesus said, you come. If you'll come, and I'll change you. I'll make a difference in your life. I'll give you something worth living for. I'll give you joy. I'll give you peace. I'll give you happiness. And even though the devil comes through and says, I'm going to make you mad. I'm going to make you angry. I'm going to take something away from you. And you look up and say, devil, you're a liar and a father of it, because I've got Jesus down in my heart. I accepted Him as my personal Savior. Have you accepted Him as Lord? Have you accepted Him? Have you looked at your shape? Micah preached. I looked at my shape this morning when Micah's preaching. I know where physically I'm totally out of shape. And I know I can do something about it. But spiritually, I prayed and asked God to make me in shape. But how are you this morning? But I know that's the most important, is how it is between me and God. Physical exercise profits little. It does profit a little. But spiritual exercise profits a lot. What about this morning? Are they in need here this morning? All heads bowed for just a minute. I will say here just a minute. I wonder if there's one that just slip up your hand and say, Brother Sammy, I want the church to pray for me. I've got a need. God bless that hand.